And good evening. Welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, reality our realm, said as we see it, and frankly as well. I'm Joe Spina, and the illustrious...
What I'm being told is I'm the reasonable one, and I guess in the conversation between you and I, maybe there's some truth to that.
Yeah, according to too many people I ran into, they talked to you about the reasonable one, and I'm going to dispute that quickly. Paul, I'm fascinated by a spike in foreclosures in the city of Lynn. So, this caption is homeless, question mark. How critical is that?
It's alarming. You never like to see that, because what it is, it's a reflection of, at least some people in the community, being unable to meet their obligations and so forth. And, the obvious ramifications are is if you lose your home, you become homeless, you got to seek other means. The interesting thing is that, and this is something that is kind of puzzling, is like a
paradoxical?
Paradoxical. You think about what is implied by a spike, an increase in foreclosures. You would think that it was at a time when the economy is declining, but unemployment is 4.9% or whatever. It's below 5. The economy is, quote, booming in some respects. You hear the government say that things are great. We keep adding jobs, and all this kind of stuff. And then the other thing, and probably this is the thing that struck me the most, is all you viewers at home, drive around the city. Most of you already know this, but if you don't, go by and look at the for sale signs anywhere in the city of Lynn, and you'll find that every one of them says under agreement, sale pending, or something like that. They're snapping them up like this, so people...
That should drive the price.
And it's driving up the price of real estate. So I don't understand how you can have a spike in foreclosures, which suggests a decline in the market at a time when there's a spike in sales and in values. I mean, the prices are going up, people are grabbing them immediately, they're overbidding on properties. So I'm not really sure that I can
reconcile those two, yeah. Because they also say that there's a 20% increase in actual seizures. They're saying the foreclosure action is up 30% to something to that effect, but the actual folks that are losing their home is increased by 20%. But here's the fact that I want to get across to you folks out there. We're talking about last year 30 and this year 36, which is hardly a huge number.
Well, so are you saying that the foreclosures in 2014 over 2015 are 30 versus 36? Is that the 30%?
The actual seizures of homes that were taken away from the homeowner last year were 30.
Right.
And this year it's 36.
So here's a case where a statistic lies, in my view. The difference between 30 foreclosures, let's just
36, yeah.
30 one year and 36 the next year. It's a 20% increase in foreclosures year over year. 20% sounds like a huge number, but with everything else that you factor in, you listen to all the other facts associated with this, with the real estate market, figure. You can say that it's a misleading stat no matter how you look at it. The fact of the matter is that year over year, I don't care what the market conditions are, you are going to have foreclosures. You might have 30 one year, you might have 35 the next year, you might only have 15 next year. And the fluctuation from 15 to 36 isn't necessarily a reflection of the broader market, it's a reflection of the circumstances involving the people involved, which is a micro.
It's a natural culling process, so to speak. Okay.
Right.
Now, I want to...
By the way, can I just add one more thing? And if you go back to 2008 and 9 when the market collapsed, that was a true spike in foreclosures. There were a lot of people thrown out of their homes because of the real estate, decline in the real estate. That was clearly a macro event. It was the result of a huge decline in the economic activity. It was a recession. The financial markets were grinding to a halt, lending stopped, all that kind of stuff. That's what caused it, as opposed to the individual circumstances of maybe you or I in our ability to meet our mortgage obligations year over year.
I want to clean up a couple of things that you said earlier on. One had to do with we have a booming economy. I would dispute that.
Well, I I dispute it as well. I guess what I'm saying is that's what we're being told, and and this gets back to my argument.
Right.
That what
So we're not at 4.9% unemployment. That's a false figure.
Right. If you look at the underemployed and not employed, and underemployed being people who are working less hours than they want to work, or people are working in jobs that are less skilled than they're capable of doing. That's so they're getting less money, less hours, that type of thing. That's more prevalent. So the 4.9 unemployment rate, while it is an accurate statistic, doesn't really tell the whole story. Once again, if you look at underemployed, it's more like 10, 11, 12%.
There are 95 million Americans out of a population of approximately 330, right?
Right.
And by the way, that 95 million is 16 and above, or probably 18 and above, because the workforce is from 18 to 65,
You're
right?
saying people that can and could and should and want to work.
Right. 95 million of them aren't working,
Right.
are out of the workforce. So that skews the unemployment figure, makes it look good.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is we have almost 50% of the people not working.
And that speaks to the unemployed that are out of the workforce.
Exactly.
Entirely. Because unemployment is a calculation based on, the decline in unemployment is based on the decline in benefits being paid to people that are currently unemployed. So you collect for unemployment for 6 weeks, or 6 months, or 13 weeks, or whatever it is, and then you don't have a job at the end of the 13 weeks, or the 6 months, or whatever it is. You are no longer, you're no longer collecting, but you are still unemployed. That no longer counts against the calculation, and that's your point, right?
Basically,
Yeah.
boom, boom, bye-bye, ferry.
Right.
Been torpedoed by, according to the local
Well, that's
newspaper,
the-
for the second time by none other than the governor of Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker. Is there any truth to this?
Truth to what?
To the fact that the boom, boom, the ferry torpedoed it? I mean, in effect, what he did was he vetoed a non-cost commission board that wanted to be established. That's all he did. It
Right.
isn't like he, said, I'm slashing money from and the way the paper came out, it's as if he,
Right.
is not funding.
That's the agenda of the newspaper, looking to, give a black eye to a guy who's doing a great job, in my view. And I would just say this about the ferry and the opportunity, that the opportunity to get the funding in some manner or form for the ferry has as great an opportunity today as it's ever had, I think, as long as the city of Lynn identifies its priorities and starts conversations with the economic development people.
So it's not bye-bye, boom, boom.
No, it's not at all. I certainly bump in the road, got derailed and slowed down, but it's a eminently fixable thing.
We have the representative from the 6th Congressional District, beating his chest about how he was able to solicit $4.5 million for the purchase of a ferry that doesn't exist, the service doesn't exist, which leads me to believe I don't see any company with a ferry to be shipped to Lynn purchased.
Well, so there's just 2 points there, and I think the first point is that why would the federal government, through Seth Moulton, purchase a $4.5 million ferry
With no service.
with no place to actually have it?
Exactly.
If we don't have the operating money to run it. So that's one question. And again, I would argue that it's a temporary position and in time that will get fixed as well, because I think a lot of people believe that the ferry is a good opportunity. What we need to do is be a little bit more creative about how the ferry will interact with the local economy and that kind of thing. And when we start thinking in those terms, I think we'll have some success. But the other question, and I don't really know the answer to this, and I don't pretend to be knowing the answer, but years ago I used to remember reading in the paper that, and this would be like a political headline, it would say, blue line on track for Lynn, something like that. And you would read the story, and it would be that whoever the state rep or the state senator from the area would say that they managed to get the study into the bond bill or something like that. And what it really meant was that it was alive but not guaranteed. And sure enough, we don't have a blue line. So every year they would put it in, it would get to the next step, and then it would be squashed there. So they would take advantage of that headline that moved it from step 1 to step 2, but it still needs to get to step 20 before it becomes official, right? And so we're hearing about step 1 and step 2, and I'm just wondering, is the ferry, the $4.5 million for the ferry, where is it in the process? Is it at step 20? Are we going to actually get that $4.5 million, assuming we have a service? Or is it something that is at step 2 or step 7 or step 12? I'd really like to know that, and I don't know the answer. Hopefully people at home do, or maybe others can share on the website. Go to Facebook and give us your comments. Would love to know what it is about this $4.5 million. Is it guaranteed, assuming that we're going to have a ferry service? Or is it still got more hurdles to overcome? I'm curious.
So no one's saying I do. The courtship's going on, but nobody says I do, right?
I don't, I suppose that's the case, but I just don't know if it's true or not. I mean, it sounded like we were getting it.
Well,
but then I've been hearing other things that suggest
we'll get into. Speaking of Mr. Moulton, by the way, I want to point a couple of things out, folks. We're going to be leaving Lynn Happenings quickly. I noted that apparently the Democratic City Committee had a cookout, a picnic, and a whole shooting gallery.
Their annual.
The annual. They all get together and they tell each other how wonderful they are. And the Republicans are going to be having theirs this Saturday. John Kroll at his home from 1 to 5. So as I was reading this, I think it's normal that a little competition between the political parties, but Mr. Moulton is quoted as telling me, trying to tell me, that Hillary Clinton is the most experienced and most qualified, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, candidate for the presidency of all time, mimicking Barack Obama, which is a stretch at best. But here's the part that really aggravated me, because I'm assuming if you're having a picnic, a family picnic get-together, that children are there, right? So where is it that he, Seth Moulton, has the stones to say that, on the other hand, he talked about Hillary Clinton glowingly. He says, on the other hand, we have, and I quote him, we have a racist who admires dictators and will be dangerous to our country and to our troops. Is that divisive? Is that exactly why we're having the type of problems we're having in this country?
Absolutely.
Doesn't that stoke calling someone a racist is really a serious charge.
Right.
If you can't defeat someone on the merits of the issue, what right do you have to say that? I think that he should apologize to the young children that were there that had to hear that.
Well, I'll just say that.
And also, I'm going to say to anybody in the city of Lynn that he in his district, that he can call a potential candidate for the presidency of the United States who got 14 million votes, that those people who support him are racist? Is that what he's trying to say?
That's exactly what he's saying. And it's very divisive, and it's, this gets back to what we've been saying in past shows about how, there's that narrative, and, there's the globalist, elitist power control type stuff going on, and the way that they maintain their power and control and remain elite is to continue to, lash out against anybody who objects to them. And you know what, you can't say, you can say a lot of things about, Donald Trump, being a loud mouth. I think of him as being, I guess I would say this, he has the pomposity that we don't, that for the humble person to take a step back. So let's just say, for example, that, he may not be a likable character because of his boastful, braggadocious kind of ways, right? But that doesn't speak at all to his skills and his qualifications. And another thing that's important to understand is every time we have an election for presidency, there is a certain tenet of the times that really needs to come into play, I think. It's like, for example, in 2007 when Barack Obama was running, it was, the economy was in a tailspin. The Republicans were, the vision was that the Republicans had really blown up the country, and we needed to go in a different direction.
Let me stop
and that's
you on
no,
that.
let me finish this piece. So that's how you're going to get a shift away from, that Republican conservative kind of approach radical swing of the pendulum. Now we're, it's more liberal, more progressive, more, statist in its approach, and that's really what's going on today. We have to kind of look and say, what are the circumstances today that are leading us to have a candidate like Trump, a candidate like Bernie Sanders, and a candidate or an established figure candidate who claims to have the ton of experience like Hillary Clinton, and before her it was Jeb Bush. It was like, we're just going to go with them because everybody recognizes their last name, they're established, everybody, experience isn't cutting it this time. Political experience.
If your experience shows that you're incompetent, that's the experience. Yeah, experience doesn't mean that it's a positive necessarily, right? I mean, if you're a robber, the experience is that you rob banks, right? Now, I want to talk about this because it's also, speaking of John Crow, who's now the new president of the Lynn City Committee, Republican City Committee, whatever. And this troubles me just as well. And he turns around and he says, I don't like either one of them. One's cancer, one's whatever, debilitating.
Yep.
I think that's inappropriate. He shouldn't be saying that either. I mean, Stephen Tchaikovsky, to his credit, who was the former president of the Lynn City Committee, he has other positions now, he said, look, whoever the nominee is, that's who I'm going to support. And I'm going to give Danny Kael, someone who I politically do not agree with often, a credit, because he said, listen, he said, my focus is on the issues of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the city of Lynn. I will be voting for Hillary Clinton. He didn't elaborate, he just did, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, that's honorable.
Right.
But for Moulton to come out and editorialize, and with these false, crazy, vindictive charges that he got talking points from, he's locked, folks, Seth Moulton will never be an independent voice for the people of the 6th Congressional District. Under any circumstances, he goes to his marching orders.
Right. And how is he any different than the former congressman? He's not.
None.
I mean, we kicked out one guy and replaced him with this guy. And,
right.
and the story is the same. So my theory would be, if everybody knows up front what these guys are going to say and do, why do we need to even have them? Why don't we just automatically say, vote however Barack Obama votes, and save the money,
I could argue that anybody with good conscience that supports someone like Hillary Clinton that's as flawed as she is disingenuous, because she is, without question, and she demonstrated by all the events that's taken place in recent times and over the past several months, is that she has difficulty telling the truth. Truth eludes her. Now, I'm going to move to a thing called anarchy. And the reason why is because there's been a lot of discussion what happened in Texas, which was horrific.
Yes, it was.
And people talking about it as black on white, white on black, this and that, and all this other stuff. And Judge Janine made a statement on Fox News that I heard, in which she said, wait a second, this has got nothing to do with racism. This is anarchy. And so, if you look at what anarchy is, I think she's got a point. She says, anarchy is a state of disorder due to the absence of non-recognizable authority. Now, Paul, you got that sheet in front of you.
Yep.
And you see all the synonyms for it. Would you read those out? And these are synonyms, folks.
Synonyms for the term anarchy, right?
For anarchy, yeah.
Right. So it's lawlessness, nihilism, mobocracy, revolution, insurrection, disorder, chaos, mayhem, tumult, and turmoil.
No good terms there.
No, they're all...
Everything's falling apart, right? And conditions are dangerously ripe today for anarchy, we could argue, right?
And let me just say that in a country that's founded by men based on a rule of laws, not a rule by men, but a rule of men, of laws,
right?
Which is very different. We are, if you look at, all of the executive actions by the president, the apparent special treatment that Hillary Clinton got with the FBI and the Department of Justice and all that kind of stuff.
Special treatment? How about a pass?
A free pass, right. She clearly violated the law, and they're ignoring the law. And it's as simple
No
as that.
consequences, Paul.
No consequences. So what they're basically saying is we, the ruling class elite, we are in a position where we can, if we want, do whatever we so choose. I mean, some of the things that these folks are doing, you know, you got Clinton hanging around with that guy Epstein and flying all over the world with, you know.
Or Mr. Pedophile himself.
Mr. Pedophile, right. So you got all that kind of stuff. It's okay for them to do those things and be outraged if anybody else does them. And, you know, that's when the ruling class aren't willing to follow the rules, anarchy can't be far behind.
I want to go to a pop star, and I wrote down the anarchist anthem. And if you take a look at the song, the lyrics of the song, it almost tells you precisely what's going to happen.
John Lennon's Imagine, right?
Yeah. Imagine there's no countries. I'm not going to sing it, though. It's hard not to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion, too.
Right.
Go on, Paul.
So you got...
Imagine...
So there's no country, there's no religion, all people living in peace, no possessions.
No possessions.
Which is, you know...
I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, the brotherhood of man. So, and the last part is, imagine all the people sharing all the world. That sums up the mindset of an anarchist, which, by the way, is noble.
It's also the mindset of a globalist.
It is.
Right.
It is. It's contradiction here.
Right.
You know, it's both.
I want to be in total control, and we want to eliminate all the things that compete against the state.
So up on the screen, folks, I don't know if we have this, is a little collage of visuals of the anarchists who have, in one way or another, changed the world. And we can argue all day long as to the merits of it all, but I really like what Charlie Chaplin had to say, and he said, "As for politics, I'm an anarchist. I hate governments, rules, and feathers. Can't stand caged animals. People must be free." That's a sentiment, a positive sentiments that I can go with, being relatively libertarian. The point is, without some barometers, without some rules to keep things in order harmony, it collapses into chaos, into anarchy, which is an evil.
Right, and you know, and the statists will argue that the libertarian or conservative view that says that, you know, less government is good government will argue that if we take away all the rules, we'll have anarchy. But that's not what the libertarian is saying. They're saying scale them back. They're not saying eliminate them, right? So what you have is a free society, and you have certain rules that are necessary. But you don't go over the top with rules. I mean, how many times, every single day we read something in the newspaper, right? And what's the first thing that you hear people say? We need to change the rules. We need to make a rule to make, so that won't happen again. You know, I drive down the road and I see somebody talking on a cell phone while they're driving, and they're obviously not paying attention enough on the road, and you say, "Oh man, that guy, he almost cut me off," and all that kind of stuff. We should change the rules. And while I know that some rules are necessary, the pace at which we're adding rules to the system.
You know what Justinian did? Justinian was a Roman emperor, the first one that ruled from Byzantine, from Istanbul, today Istanbul, Constantinople. His first act as emperor was the codification of laws. He wanted to get rid of them.
Right.
Maybe we ought to have something like that happen here, where we take all these rules and start getting rid of a whole bunch of them that overlap, make no sense, which is precisely what Charlie Baker tried to do vis-a-vis the ferry, which say we don't need duplication, so he vetoed duplication.
Right.
Now, I think that's an admirable thing. Somehow, for Charlie McGee and others to think
and
it's
by
not.
By the way, in addition to, you know, that particular decision, he instructed all of the secretariats and all of the departments within the administration of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to evaluate all of their rules and eliminate those that were duplicative,
Charlie's doing
unnecessary.
that?
It's already in process. It's been going on for the past year.
That's a good thing, isn't it?
It absolutely is. You know, let's say, you know, we don't need a rule on the books that says that it's illegal for your horse to poop on the road and you not clean it up. I mean, do we have horses? You know, I mean, some of these rules don't matter anymore, you know? And I know that's a kind of a outrageous, and it's a, you know, but there are a lot of rules that are less outrageous than that.
Unnecessary, they're antiquated, right.
Right.
The old blue laws.
But the other thing is, you know, to me, there are certain rules that are built on the premise that if one person does something that they shouldn't do, that we should change the rule so that it encumbers everybody to behave differently because of that one person's action. And those are the kinds of rules that I think need to go away.
Well, we have a little section here called you know, for thoughts.
Things
folks.
that make you say,
And we kind of break up the flow a little bit. And in this particular one, if it gets up there, let's see if the one I think about, and you'll love this, Paul, if voting changed anything, they'd make it illegal.
wow.
You like that one?
Who said that?
Anarchy. Looks like anonymous, isn't
Right.
it?
But you know, let's break that down. If voting changed anything, they'd make it illegal. In other words, the way voting works today, we're able to maintain the status quo, so the ruling class elite, they're all in charge. In fact, the Donald Trump phenomenon is freaking them out.
Because they want to, and same thing with what happened in the UK. Right. They want to make it illegal.
Right. As soon as it went against the ruling class's perspective
they
on things.
It's illegal now. They want to rescind the rule.
Right. We need to have a 2/3 majority. Or
all this stuff.
Right.
So therefore, this makes a lot of sense. If voting changed anything, they make it illegal.
Right, because they don't want to change anything.
Exactly.
They just want to tell you they're changing, right? Government stinks.
You like that one?
Yeah.
Now let's go way back in history to the Greek philosopher, of which you're part Greek. And what does he say about wise men?
Wise men talk because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something. Yeah, I love that.
You like that one?
Yeah.
Folks, you like that one? Tell me, do you ponder these things? Because there's a lot of truth in these little hums.
Right.
Now, Chomsky, who's contemporaneous, you know, he's over there at MIT, I believe, right? Teaching over there. He's a
Noam
linguist.
Chomsky?
Yeah, Noam Chomsky. He said you cannot, and this goes to what we've been talking about in a lot of shows, you cannot control your population by force, but it can be distracted by consumption.
Bread and circus, right? Isn't that the whole Russian, the Roman kind of approach to keeping them busy, right?
Yeah.
The circus or the Olympiad and all that kind of stuff, that was to distract the masses, and they kept feeding them to, you know. And what are we doing today? It's food stamps and football games.
That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
And by the way, this also fits into what Bill Casey, the former CIA guy back in 1981, said about disinformation.
Right.
You know, we got a winner when they believe that disinformation is a reality, right?
When 100% of our disinformation is viewed as fact.
Well, when they're trying to tell us that Hillary Clinton didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
That's disinformation, is it not?
Yeah.
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 To which Chuck Moulton, Seth Moulton, whatever his name is, you know, he agrees with that.
Right. And the question is he fooled by the disinformation, or is he part of the disinformation campaign?
He's part of it, of course. Yeah. He himself, you recall during his candidacy, research was done as to his advertised business venture and health.
Oh yeah, we did that. We found out that there was
Did
nothing
it exist?
to it. Didn't even exist.
No.
It was a mailbox.
It was a phony as well, whatever. So basically, I want to get into different hues have different views. How do you like that one?
Different hues meaning different colors.
That's it. Very good, Paul. You're getting smart about the pomposity that you gave, you know, to try to sneak by us earlier. So we have this thing called black and blue, or black versus blue. And I want to throw up the oath of law enforcement, the oath of honor. And I think it's important for people to read this and think about it. Because these are the guys, in my view, Paul, without them, anarchy is right around the corner.
Talking about the police.
On my honor, I will never betray my badge, my integrity, my character, or my trust. I will always have the courage to hold myself and others accountable for our actions. I will always uphold the Constitution, my community, and the agency I serve. That's the oath that the officers take.
Police
Lynn,
officers,
and everywhere, right?
Yep.
Whether it's Ferguson or Orlando or St. Paul, Minnesota or Baton Rouge or in Dallas. That's admirable, Paul. And I saw this woman, an African-American woman, who got shot in the leg, and she talked about how the officers
were helping her.
Jumped right on top of her, who would have taken the bullets to protect her,
Right.
saved her kids. She couldn't say enough for them. We have more of that and less of this friction.
Antagonism, yeah.
There's like a collage, and I don't know if we have that, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. A lot of that is just a bunch of noise, because ultimately, all hues are important, right?
Yeah,
all
and,
hues.
And one of the things, I alluded to this last week when we were kind of doing the tease for this show, to talk about racism and so forth. And one of the things that I think is really important for people to understand, at least it's important for me to believe in, is that noise you're talking about. Black Lives Matter screaming this, and the conservative right screaming that, and all that stuff is noise. To me, what's important is how do you feel in your heart about any matter of the day, including racism? Are you personally, can you look yourself in the mirror and look yourself right in the eye and say, I am or I am not a racist? That's where this problem gets solved. It's one person at a time addressing it on their own and trying to do what they can to, I think, embody kind of a live and let live kind of attitude. And that when you start doing that, all the noise that you're talking about it sounds like a whir instead of noise,
Yeah. Well said, Paul.
And we need to get away from, having the news media tell us how we feel. They tell us how we feel.
We'll never do that here, though.
They tell us how we feel. They tell us how we should be behaving. They tell us all this stuff, and it's really for their own agenda, as opposed to, I think we need to be thinking about it from our own individual agendas.
We got a little quiz we're going to try to throw up there. It's a little true-false, which, by the way, my dog, Luigi, would get 50% right just by going with his paw, right? You can throw dots, you're going to get 50% right.
Yeah.
Right, on true-false. The first one has to do with, and this is the molten, I'm going to call it the molten, ethos, which is the way liberals and progressives look at racism.
How liberals think?
Yeah.
So I'll read this, and then you can help me with it, because I'm not sure I understand it. Black on black crime is caused by socioeconomic disadvantage. True or false? Now, is it true or false that that's how the liberal sees it, or is it true or false?
Yeah. Is that how the liberal sees it? And that would be true, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I agree with that.
What's the other thing that they say?
White on black
Yeah.
crime is caused by racism. I disagree with that. But
So in other words, that's the way they feel, so therefore it's true from their perspective, right?
By the way, there's, if there's 330 million people in this country, and there's a gazillion different interactions on any given day amongst those 330 million people, there are going to be crimes that involved, it'll be white on black or black on white. And I will tell you that you can't say that no matter what, if it's white on black or if it's black on white, that it had to be racism. It just defies logic to assume that that's the case.
But there's another thing.
Using the broad brush to categorize the stuff is part of the problem. The news wants to paint everything with a broad brush. If one person does it, everybody is guilty of it, and that's no good. That if one person, we have this tragedy in Louisiana and in Minnesota, and so two circumstances, by the way, which haven't been fully understood yet, but two circumstances where it was technically white police on a black individual, and it's characterized, it has to be racist, is what all of the noise is saying.
That's right. But if we
walk, it may be, but it doesn't necessarily mean.
But if we walk through the factual stuff, then we can realize that there's a mythology out there that doesn't exist, which fuels this division of black and white.
And I love the use of that term, mythology, and that's, I think, what's going on. Is what the news media is doing is they're passing on a myth, and they want us to believe it, so that to create anarchy. I mean, that's the way I see it.
True, but what's that last?
The last one is it's automatically racist to mention black on white crime.
Okay, that's what they believe. This is what liberals believe.
And the fact is, I mean, that guy that shot the 5 police officers.
All right. Now, so
all
of that above, the way liberals perceive racism, right? is true. That's the way they see it, even though it doesn't comport to the reality. Right? Now, there's a bunch of stats down there. Came out in 2015, so it's not like antiquated, right?
Right.
And it gives you what is happening crime-wise. I mean, people can look at it themselves and draw their own conclusions. It's up on the screen, okay? And if you notice that the police, you know, killing ethnic groups or particular segments, it's very low when it comes to police killing.
Right. Yeah, I heard the stat that more white people have been killed by police in the last 6 months.
Because there's far more white people.
No, but it's not, you know, granted, but the argument that I keep hearing on the news and in the media is that it happens far too often white on black.
They're trying to say that there is a systemic bigotry within police departments, even though the police chief in Dallas is black, and the whole situation in Baltimore up and down the line was black, was it not?
Right.
Police officers, mayor, district attorney, etc. So,
and some of the people that were accused of killing that Freddie Gray, I mean, were black.
yeah, so it doesn't hold up on the scrutiny.
Right.
Just like hands up, don't shoot was also a myth.
flat out lie, right?
Right. Meanwhile, the President of the United States was down in Dallas the other day and could not help himself. He went after guns, and he talked about systemic racism, as did Hillary Clinton. And that's not the issue. The issue is we're going to end up with anarchy if we allow people to go out there and shoot policemen, and you know they have a tough enough job as it is. There are protection, Paul, from the barbarians.
Right. And
Does anybody understand that?
Right. And barbarians there's no skin color attached to a barbarian.
No. Not only that, they don't have any rules.
Right.
They're true anarchists. So I want to walk through this segment here, folks. I want you to understand. Let me pre-state it. It's entitled Black-Eyed Racism. And the reason why I said that is I want to go down a list of black Americans, African Americans, and what they've said, their comments about racism, and let it stand on that, Paul.
Right.
And, you know, from their perspective. Now, the very first one is Toni Morrison, who is a, you know, prominent writer in the black community, a very prominent woman. And she says that racism is a social construct. And from her perspective, there is no such thing as race, none. There is just a human race. Scientifically, anthropologically, racism is a construct, a social construct. It has a social function, racism. That's what she has to say.
Right.
Paul, any comment on social construct?
Yeah, I mean,
she makes sense.
Yeah, you know, and you know, to speak about the social construct, also you can't. I can't help but be reminded of comments that I've heard recently in the news that the United States does not have a class system, and you know, in other words, there's the upper class, middle class, lower class, all that kind of stuff, and
I dispute that.
But that's my point. Is you know it's a social construct, and whether people are saying that there is or there isn't doesn't matter. There's a ruling class elite. There's no doubt about it.
Classes. There's a caste system.
Right. And by the way, for all of those ruling class elites who are saying that we want to create opportunity for all of the disenfranchised and those less than others, they don't. They don't want anybody joining their club. They don't want Donald Trump joining their club. I mean, their club.
Obviously.
I mean, so there is a double standard there. There's when they say that there is no class, and I think because there really is a class system, that the class system has a more prominent role in things that would be attributed to racism than the color of somebody's skin. So in other words, it's more likely that you will be eschewed by society because you're poor inner city, not because you're poor inner city and black. Poor in inner city is enough. You know what I mean?
Underclass.
And what I would say about that is, that's not to say that there isn't truly, a perspective that the black person deals with on a daily basis that makes them feel, uncomfortable, not given a fair shake. But, you look at what happened to Barack Obama. Here's a guy who's got all of those hues, as you put it, and he managed to become the president of the United States. So the opportunities are there, and I think we need to continue to push on those opportunities and give people what they need to move out of the lower classes and up to the next classes. And
I
that
got a
kind of stuff.
newsflash for you.
What's that?
Barack Obama's mother is Caucasian.
Yep.
And I got another newsflash for you. His mentor, otherwise known as Reverend Jeremiah.
Right.
Yeah. He says to Toni Morrison, oh, no, on the contrary. Forget the social construct thing. He says, there's white racist DNA running through the synapses of his or her brain tissue. That's you, Paul. They will kill their own kind, defend the enemies of their kind, and anyone who is perceived to be the enemy of the milky white way of life. Now, if you want to talk about racism and a racist comment, that's
huge. But
that fella, by the way, was Barack Obama's mentor.
Was informing Barack Obama for 20 years.
He was in church for 20 years.
Yeah, and one thing I would say is, the world that he comes from and the things that he endorses and supports. You could substitute, for example, white racist. You could progressive. You could put progressive in there. The progressive DNA running through the synapses of his or her own brain tissue. They will kill their own kind, defend the enemies of their kind, or anyone who's perceived to be the enemy of the progressive. Right? That's more true than what he's saying.
The point of the matter is that is extremely divisive, and that's where your problem is. And here is the plain and simple from Muhammad Ali. He turns around and he says, hating people because of their color is wrong. And it doesn't matter which color does the hating, it's just plain wrong.
And that's
To the point.
so simple but so eloquent. And it's too bad that we've lost Muhammad Ali because he was
and we look at him as a boxer, but that's a pretty profound and to the point statement. And if you look historically, and we talk about, the content of your character.
Well, that's what Martin Luther King said, and
Well,
I love that. That's like the most important thing to me.
Exactly, but character knows no color, Paul.
Right.
And you have Booker T. Washington. And Booker T., we're talking about the 19th century here. This is Jim Crow days, you get what I mean? And what did he have to say there, Paul? He said, few things help an individual to be continued by you.
So few things help an individual more than to place responsibility upon him and to let him know that you trust him. So, it's like I always refer to the social compact, and there's government plays a role in protecting us and giving us opportunities to succeed, but then it's up to us to take responsibility and do it. And that doesn't matter who you are, what color you are.
Who echoed the same sentiment? Take a look. You used to love
Jackie
this guy.
Robinson.
Same sentiment. What do you have
I'm
to
not
say?
concerned with your liking or disliking me. All I ask is that you respect me as a human being. And
Once again, isn't that
so eloquent? Yep.
I mean, it's perfect, isn't it? Now, folks, Malcolm X is looked at historically many different ways. Some people think he's the greatest, martyr. Others think that he was a revolutionary. But you know what? He had a moment of wisdom for sure. And Malcolm X said this. He said, don't be in such a hurry to condemn a person because he doesn't do what you do, or think as you think, or as fast. There was a time when you didn't know what you know today. I find that to be profound, and a great deal of wisdom.
A certain amount of wisdom in that for sure, and I went to Catholic school, and I don't know whether, I am ashamed to say that I don't remember if this is one of the commandments or whether it's just a kind of an edict or whatever, but do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? So if you want to be treated with respect and fairness, it starts with you doing it outwardly to everybody around you, and the expectation is that you'll get it in return. And when people don't follow that, screw them. We're going to stay. We want to be surrounded by people that get that message. It's as simple as that.
Multiculturalism. We've talked about this in the past. Now, there is multicultural racism. Thomas Sowell is a fellow in Stanford, Southern California, at the Hoover Institute, Stanford University. And Thomas Sowell's written often, and he says what multiculturalism boils down to is that you can praise any culture in the world except Western culture. And you cannot blame any culture in the world except Western culture. That's also profound, and that's also racist.
Right. Well, that's, and that gets down to the underpinnings of this revolutionary movement that is Saul Alinsky-like. It's Bernardine Dawn and Pivot and Cloud. All these people that are looking for revolution, is their attitude is, can you repeat that? Can you repeat your last line there?
Yeah. He says you can blame multiculturalism, boils down to is that you can praise any culture.
Oh, right. So what they're doing is they're saying that the Western culture, which is European descent, right?
Right.
And is prominent in this country, the only way to improve the lives of those who don't fit into that category is to overwhelm them and eliminate them, and that's essentially what's going on. It's a haves and have-nots kind of argument, don't you think?
I think what Thomas
Zero-sum game too.
What Thomas Sowell is relating to is white privilege, and that's what he's talking about. He's saying that there's an assault. People say that the reason why you, Paul, or whatever, a Caucasian does well or aspires is strictly because of white privilege.
So how does that explain Barack Obama?
Because he's at least half white. I don't know. But that's, the point I'm trying to make is simply this, is that through the eyes, the black community is not monolithic. They don't think like a herd mentality. It isn't all Black Lives Matter. There's very sensitive and there's many different views. I wish the folks would realize that, which is
Dr. Ben Carson.
Another example.
Right.
And you go beyond and beyond and beyond.
I have a lot of friends that are, very impressive people.
Well, my point is that this bell curve, so to speak, of attitudes and views exists in all groups and subgroups.
Right.
Okay. What we're looking for, or we should be looking for as a society and as a people, is harmony, not the extremes. The extremes are destructive. That's why when Moulton talks about Trump as being a racist, that's destructive.
Right.
Don't do that because he's hardly a racist. If he were, I wouldn't be supporting him. And I am, by the way, supporting him. You know why I'm supporting him? Because he's going to blow the system up, and it deserves to be blown up.
Right.
We don't need 4 more years
of the status quo. Right.
We only have a few minutes left. Here's number 2, which I know you're going to love because you love these things. Napoleon. He wasn't too tall, kind of a short guy.
Yes.
But he had a big brain.
Right.
And he said, in politics, stupidity is not a handicap.
Right.
I love that. In politics, stupidity is not a handicap.
Yeah. Well, and
which probably answers a lot of questions.
But it gets to the root of the issue, and that is that the consummate politician, if you will, is always looking to get the political advantage, not necessarily looking to do the right thing.
Got nothing to do with brains.
So you don't need to be smart, or all you just need to do is be clever.
Treacherous.
Treacherous is a good.
Treachery is the key.
Right.
Your guy, you love
George Carlin.
What do you have to say?
Grew up on him.
You love him.
And I'm with him on this one, right?
You like this one?
I'd like to expand it a little bit, but he said he has certain rules I live by. My first rule: I don't believe anything the government tells me. And you know what? I start out by saying I don't believe it until I need some proof.
That's ingrained in your cerebellum.
But it's all. The other thing is I don't believe anything I read in the newspapers. I mean, most of what you read in the newspapers is at best misinformation because of a mistake, but sometimes more deviously it's misinformation by design.
as we go back to Mr. Casey, who said disinformation, disinformation. Now we got him.
Right.
And Noam Chomsky, you're getting our last call. We're going to give you a double hit on the item of the issue of globalization, Paul. You'll love this one. He says it's the result. Go ahead.
Okay, so globalization is the result of powerful governments, especially that of the United States, pushing trade deals and other accords down the throats of the world's people to make it easier for the corporations and the wealthy to dominate the economies of nations around the world without having obligations to the peoples of those nations.
I ask you a simple question, Paul. Having read that, who do you think Noam Chomsky must, by virtue of what he just said, vote for?
Donald Trump?
No question.
Right.
This is precisely.
Right. Well, that, you know, and
precisely. And he's looked at as an ultra-liberal.
So yesterday, Bernie Sanders endorsed Hillary Clinton, right? And I saw a headline on this in a conservative news site, which you guys are going to love this. So Bernie Sanders endorsing Hillary Clinton is the equivalent of the Occupy Wall Street group endorsing Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
It's so unbelievable that, so Bernie Sanders is a sellout to all of his supporters.
Well, isn't he?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't believe he just turned on them. He had legions of people that were going for what he was talking about. You know, the powerful, the corrupt, and all that kind of stuff. By the way, those were the things I believed in. I mean, I don't believe in all the free stuff, but I do believe that, you know, the power and wealth that kind of controls the system as we know it and keeps it from changing, as we were quoting about earlier, is something that needs to be upset. And I didn't agree with the giving out the free stuff, but him and Trump were both feeding on the emotions of the American populace around those very issues, and he sold out. It's unbelievable.
This has nothing to do with anything, folks. It's just a stream of consciousness.
Right.
But I thought it was interesting that my second daughter, who I love dearly, tricked me on something. She said, "What do you call a dog that's a mixed breed?" And she says, "Well, it's called a mongrel, a mutt, right?" I said, "Yeah, isn't that what it's called?" She goes, No. That's a designer dog."
The designer dog.
Don't you love that? I thought it was so cute.
Well, you know, and in this day and age, you know, there's so many different ways to describe the mood or the term or the thing that you're.
Oh, the evolution of words and meanings.
Right. It's like going from illegal immigrant, which was set because
undocumented.
It fully explained the situation. It was an immigrant that was here illegally. Case closed. And then they changed it to undocumented so that they could remove the stigma of them being, quote, illegal. However, the problem is that they still are illegal, and you can never take that distinction away. So an illegal versus a legal immigrant there's a differentiation there that needs to be established. And I'm sorry, I don't buy that. It's just that they don't have their papers.
Well, you know, a great writer, otherwise known as William Shakespeare, used very simple language to make a point, which I wish people would do. You know, instead of skewing and passing words, trouble with lawyers. Yeah. He said profoundly, "To be or not to be. There is no word more than 3 letters long." On that note, folks, I want you to think about it until next week when we meet again. Joe Spina and Paul Crowley. Have a great week.